Welcome to Fun is Fundamental. Fun is Fundamental is a podcast for those who realize that the enjoyment of life is about having something deep in our souls which lights our fire. It's for those who maybe have lost that fire and feel like they are missing out on the pleasures of life. In each episode, I will share recent fun activities and focus on why having fun is essential for good health. I'm your host, Elenia, and I invite you to take this journey with me and join the pleasure-seeking movement. Hello, welcome to a new episode of Fun is Fundamental. And this week we're going to talk about going to cat cafes. We went to a cat cafe with several friends a couple of weeks ago, I guess. It's very, very memorable experience. It's just like a room full of little kitties, and they're so cute. I love cats so much. I love animals in general. I love dogs too, but I don't know. Cats are just such interesting creatures, and I love them. They're so cute, little kitty faces. So there are obviously pros and cons to going to cat cafes. You definitely should do research about the cat cafe that you will be going to, because there have been some that there's news articles and stuff like that about problems with cat cafes. Obviously it depends, and I think that generally if they are ones that are not really in it for profit and that are, really focused on getting cats adopted, then it often can be a good thing. But yeah. So anyway, we went to Neko Cat Cafe on Capitol Hill, and then we also went to Seattle Meowtropolitan in Wallingford. And in these cases, both cases, we rented out the whole room. But sometimes you can also just book a slot, and you would then share the room with other people, other strangers, which, wouldn't necessarily be that terrible. But at least Neko Cat Cafe, the room is really small. So personally, I would, for that one especially, I would rather, book it on your own. I think generally can be good to get, teach cats how to socialize and to get along with other cats. I mean, it's really is a form of fostering, and it can be good to help the cats to be able to be friendly with other humans. If you get a cat from a cat cafe, that you could definitely have your friends come over and your cat's gonna be like, hey, how you doing? The cat cafes definitely make sure to make things really nice and cozy. They have, all the cats had little spots to sit at. There were about 20 cats, and they all had there were so many nice little spots for them to perch and to cuddle, and there were a lot of toys for them to play with, and they had their own little air room to go into to go to the bathroom and things like that. And I think especially with the younger cats, because they were didn't necessarily have they were growing up together, they would just pile on top of each other, and they were so familiar with each other and they really loved each other. If you get older cats, they definitely have their personalities and habits really more formed, and they kind of are more standoffish with each other, but generally they mostly seemed happy to get some cuddles, and they can step away whenever they need to. But there's lots of space for them to have a place, and they could get up high and away from people, especially in Meowtropolitan. They could just stay the hell away from people if they wanted to. But I think it's good for them to be able to socialize, but also for people, it makes people really want to adopt a cat more, because then they can really see the cat's personality with people and other cats and stuff like that. Not necessarily with dogs, but at least it gets more of a opportunity to see what the cat is actually like. cat cafes, they started in Taiwan in 1998. They spread all over the world. Obviously to Japan. I actually thought they were from Japan originally because everything's from Japan, don't you know? Um, but they actually started in Taiwan. I guess, like I said earlier, there are some critiques of cat cafes, like the idea that it's not natural for cats to live with so many other cats, which is not always necessarily true. Like you definitely have like it's not like necessarily a good thing to like hoard cats, but like people have always like rescued cats. I think like a cat cafe is going to be a better situation than cats just being in a shelter in a cage. So like, I don't know, like people having this critique about it when it's just like I guess I would say like the critique of like the cats being touched by a lot of people maybe is more of a critique. But I think as long as like the cats have the ability to like perch away from people if they're just like, no, I don't want to be touched right now, then the cat cafes like take like making sure that like the cat can take care of themselves and their needs if like their need is to be alone. Yeah, I found like a lot of the cats like really liked being touched, and really liked they wanted to come up and like be like, "Hey, how you doing?" And like they were super friendly. And so like I think they make sure to like not every cat is the cat for a cat cafe. They were going to pick cats that have more outgoing personality. Although the funny thing was with the younger cats with the kittens is that they actually didn't really want to be touched much. And I don't know if that was more of they're just really interested in exploring and playing, and they don't really want to be settled and be pet by a stranger. But also maybe like if they were had been growing up in a cat cafe, maybe they're just like, yeah, I don't really want to be touched anymore. I don't know. Whereas like some of the older ones that only like came into the cat cafe when they were older, like they seem like totally like, yeah, yeah, hey, how are you doing? Like I had a cat like in my lap and the cat seemed totally fine, like that kind of thing. There is a concern that the cats might get stressed out and be under duress, but at least locally, the people that run the cat cafes seem like they really love the cats. And if they notice a cat being stressed out, they're gonna like, if worse comes to worse, like, take them out of the cat cafe. Sometimes it just doesn't work out with a certain cat to be in a cat cafe. And, obviously, like, if you're trying to get a cat adopted, it's not a good thing for like the cat to seem like they're in distress. That's not helping them to get adopted. It's obviously not good for the cat. Like it's a lose-lose situation. Obviously there are cat cafes that are being run by people for profit. There's ones that are using breeders instead of finding having rescue cats, adoptable rescue cats. I think if it was really a problem widespread, then we would be hearing a lot more about like cat cafes are bad. Whereas it's really more of like individual cat cafes and like I understand like concerns because they're living creatures. And so it's not like, it shouldn't be like a conversation, but in reality there's just not like a lot of evidence that this is like a widespread problem. There are obviously reports of animal mistreatment and neglect, but there's not a lot of them. So, I think just generally when you find like cats that are a good fit, these are cats that are, you're trying to adopt them out, you're trying to have these cats be healthy because you want them to be happy and, for people to be like, yeah, I really love this cat. This is a great cat. I want to adopt it. And like I said, I think it's a better living situation than a traditional shelter. for most animals. Like, really, that's seems like a really not great, situation for a lot of animals. Generally, there's more than 300,000 dogs and cats that are killed in shelters every year, and there's only two states that are no kill states, and that's Delaware and New Hampshire. And, my state of Washington isn't a high kill state, but, I still don't want like cats that can have a good life, that are not sick, that are not seriously feral or something like that, to be euthanized if we can get them homes, right? That's the thing. I guess like we live in a country. I mean, it's really a problem all around the world, obviously, where, pets are not, we love pets and like, we're like, oh, we make a big deal about pets, but at the same time, we're allowing animals to, we still have a lot of people that don't have their animals fixed. We still have a lot of like animals being born and not being taken care of, or, that are being abused. And this is still an issue, even though like we, I guess, kind of in a way pretend that it's not really an issue. Like I said, there are a few horror stories. And so, if you are thinking of going to a cat cafe, make sure to do research, because, I'm sure none of us want to contribute to, any animals being abused, any sicknesses going around, sanitary issues, and, ones that are not, actually having animals that are rescue animals that are up for adoption, because it contributes to the problem of puppy mills, which are such a disgusting act, and just adds to more and more abuse of animals that, we talk about them being like, we love them, and like we watch videos of them all the time, and we talk about them being our best friends and stuff like that, but we still are living in a country where this is the reality of a lot of animals, companion animals. So do your research, long and short of it. So, I guess like we can also talk about the benefits to humans going to cat cafes. And I mean, generally pets are so good for humans. Like they are great for relieving stress and anxiety, and they help with feelings of loneliness and depression. And, there's so many people that are dealing with loneliness, depression, and anxiety, in this country. And so people have the means to take care of an animal, and they can have an animal. I think it's a great thing to help with those things. Although, we hope that like people can have other outlets, of course, to help with those too. They also give people a purpose if they, feel like they don't have a lot of purpose and they feel kind of lost. Having to take care of something outside of yourself can be really beneficial for people. They also encourage playfulness and lightheartedness, which we definitely need more of all the time. These mental health improvements also help with physically. They help with cardiovascular health, and they lower people's cortisol and blood pressure, which of course helps with cardiovascular health. The act of petting an animal can help you tap into your parasympathetic nervous system, which, so often we're in that sympathetic nervous system, which is, the fight or flight part of us, and we have just a hard time just being able to relax. And so like, just hanging out with your pet friend and, petting them just really like is such a great way to relax. And, it's kind of a meditation when you get into like, just like the feeling, getting mindfulness of, feeling their fur, and feeling like their purr, vibrate. And it's just like, yeah, that's really a great thing for for people and for the animal, we all need to be more mindful. Animals have also been known to benefit children with ADHD and autism. I have like a little quote from Dr. Ann Berger, who is a physician and researcher at NIH Clinical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. I guess that's how you say it. And she says, the foundation of mindfulness include attention, intention, compassion, and awareness. All of these things are things that animals bring to the table. People kind of have to learn it. Animals do this innately. If you think about it, like, children have to learn empathy and stuff like that, like, it's not just like, we don't just come out being empathetic, because like when you first come out, you're just like, it's just me, you're just id, and you're just like, I'm hungry, like, change my diaper, like, it's just, you just have these needs and you need them met, and you're just gonna like do anything that you can to get them met. And we continue to have needs, but we figure out that, like, yeah, there's other people that exist, and a lot of the way to get your needs met are by paying attention to those other people and being like, yeah, I like, let's work together to, yeah, they talk about compassion, and it benefits us to be compassionate towards other people and ourselves, and then she also talks about attention, intention, and awareness. And like, I mean, I feel like attention and awareness can be like similar, but like that's really like the core of mindfulness, is just to be like just there. And we get so caught in our brains and our heads, and just like, just the yammering, blah, 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 blah. And that will never stop, as anyone who has tried to meditate will know, because if you are alive, your brain is doing brain stuff. But if you can just have like those little moments, where it's just, getting into the moment. And the more that you try to do it, the more that you just are just there, the easier it gets. So, having a pet is a great way to just kind of get you to that state, over and over and over. So I guess I've definitely made it very clear that pets are good, and that cat cafes have the potential to be good, but that you got to take each one with a grain of salt, I guess. So I guess I'm going to close this out. I found a poem by Walt Whitman that is just, it just paints the picture of just how amazing animals are and how people should be a little bit more like them. So I think I could turn and live with the animals. They are so placid and self-contained. I stand and look at them long and long. They do not sweat and whine about their condition. They do not lie awake in the dark and weep for their sins. They do not make me sick, discussing their duty to God. Not one is dissatisfied. Not one is demented with the mania of owning things. Not one kneels to another, nor his kind that lived thousands of years ago. Not one is responsible or industrious over the whole earth. I just like how Walt Whitman just kind of cuts through all the bullshit of, humans being like, talking about having dominion over the earth, and like, like acting like we're like these gods, but at the same time also being like, oh, we're, yeah, we're sinners if we're not doing good, like, for God, and things like that. And yeah, animals are they just exist. They just are. And they don't need any of the bullshit, vanity, and ego that humans do. And I mean, I guess I'm like, do they don't need it, but I'm like, do we need it really? I guess like, there are some things that like our ego is good for. Our ego, like, it warns us not to do things that could harm us, like that kind of thing. But it just becomes too much, And I mean, animals have instinct to not touch something that's going to burn them. And so, like, you would hope that, I guess the ego is part of our instincts. But anyway, there's just a lot of other thoughts that come up that harm us and hold us down, and there's too much to say. Anyway, I'm going to try to keep this short. So I'm just going to say that I hope you have fun and that you find ways to stay warm in the winter and to take care of yourself, and that I love you and I hope that you have a good day. All right. Bye.